What's going on, y'all? I'm Czar, and I want to show you a brand new plugin from Waves, the RS124. So Waves and Abbey Road have teamed up to bring us yet another iconic piece of gear from the legendary studio. Not only do we get a plug-in emulation of this classic compressor, but Waves has added their own features on top, making the plug-in more functional than what the hardware was capable of. And fun fact, this is the only plug-in version of this compressor that's been officially approved by Abbey Road. Let's take a look. So here is the RS124. Let's go over the controls and then we'll go over how this sounds. So starting from the left, you've got an auto hold. What this is going to do is hold your compression in place, and we'll take a look at an example of that. You have your recovery as your release from fast back to slow. This has an automatic attack. Input control is going to feed more level into the compressor, and your output. And so you've got two unit types here. So you have studio and then you have cutter. Only difference with the cutter is it has a slower attack time. So cutter has a slower attack time and studio has a faster attack. And then you've got a super fuse button here, which when you turn this on, it gives it a more aggressive compression character. And it reminds me of an 1176 with all buttons in, except for this has its own unique characteristic to it. Okay, so I've got two scenes here in Studio One. I've got one with the RS124 off and one with the RS124 on. So we'll switch between the two because I've got a track here from Simone Curry and I'm using the RS124 on the vocal, and I'm also using a stereo version of the RS124 on the track. And while we got the stereo version here, I also forgot to go over this expand button. If you expand this, you have your typical Waves features here of the sidechain high pass filter here that goes up to 200 hertz, and you've got a wet and dry, and you've got your link and unlink, and you've got your typical Waves stereo, dual mono, mid side. Okay, so I'm going to first play this with it off so you can hear what we'll be working with here, and then I'll turn it on and let you hear what the RS124 will do for this.
I can't get myself back on my feet. See the lights on the street like stars. But look what I found. Somebody who loves me. Look what I found. Somebody who carry around a piece of my heart. Just laying on the ground.
Okay, and this is with the RS124.
I can't get myself back on my feet. See the lights on the street like stars. But look what I found. Somebody who loves me. Look what I found. Somebody who carry around a piece of my heart. Just laying on the ground.
Okay, so let's take a closer look at what the RS124 is doing here. So we've got the studio version that we're using right now, and I want you to pay attention to the first phrase here, maybe up to like here. So with it, let's turn it off for a second. Listen to the word back here, how it jumps out, and listen to the word see right here, how it's a little buried under the track. So this is with the RS124 bypassed.
I can't get myself back on my feet. See the lights on the street like.
Okay, we'll turn the RS124 on and listen to those parts again.
I can't get myself back on my feet. See the lights on the street like.
It's doing a great job of handling the dynamics. It really takes that word back where it was jumping out and brings it in. And if we go to the cutter, see, this is where we're hearing the effect of a slower attack. So on the cutter mode, listen to that word back now.
I can't get myself back on my feet. See the lights on the street like.
That word back is starting to jump out again with that slower attack. Let's go back to the studio mode and let's go down to the end of the phrase here and hear how the RS124 handled this loud dynamic at the end. Let's start with it off.
Carry round a piece of my heart, just laying on the ground.
And with it on.
Carry round a piece of my heart, just laying on the ground.
Very controlled sounding. Let's go to the stereo version here. We'll just solo this. We're just dealing with the track now, and I'm gonna just bring this in and bypass it on and off and let you hear what the RS124 is doing to this. On the track here, I've got the high pass filter up to 200. So the RS124 is really adding some weight just to the overall track. So that's an example of it on vocals and a track there. Let's move on now to some live drums, which is another source that I've been really enjoying the RS124 on. So on these drums, we'll take a look at the auto hold feature as well as the super fuse feature. So the first thing I'm going to do is switch this over to cutter for the slower attack since we're dealing with drums. And we'll start with this bypassed, and I'll start to play it, and I'll bring it in and let you hear what the RS124 does to these drums. I'm using this across the whole drum bus. Okay, so it's really adding that smack to these drums. I love this compressor on drums. Let's look at the auto hold feature. So the auto hold is going to hold the compression in place. So I think we're getting, somewhere between 10 and 15 dB. When I turn it on, you'll see the compression just hold there. So here's an example of that. So that's the auto hold. And now let's look at this super fuse. So like I said, it reminds me of All Buttons In on 1176. Let's take a listen to that. And because we've got the wet and dry, we can blend back some of the dry signal. So let's set this to 50-50, and then we'll kind of blend both ways and hear it. We're still using the super fuse. So that's a super fuse, very aggressive compression characteristic there. So my final thoughts on the RS124. I really, really like this compressor. It works well on a lot of sources, bass, drums, vocals, guitars, even mix bus, and it has its own unique sound to it. It really sounds different than anything else in Waves lineup. And I'll go ahead and say I feel it's the most tone-rich compressor in Waves lineup. Now, there's some things about it that I feel react a little, I don't want to say unconventional, but for example, the even with the release at its fastest, it still doesn't go back to zero before another phrase starts. If you saw, like with the vocals, which is kind of a general rule of compression to me, is to set the release so that it goes back to zero. This compressor isn't fast enough to do that, but it still sounds good, which means it really doesn't matter. If it sounds good, then it doesn't matter. And another thing is how far you can really dig in with this compressor. Most compressors start to choke once you push it past 10, 12 dB. With this, I can push it up to probably about 20 dB before you really start to hear compression. And even then, you really don't hear it too much. I mean, you can really dig in and push this compressor. It's not something that you want to do a couple dB with. Like, you want to drive it to that 10 to 15 dB. I feel like that's the sweet spot for this. So let's talk about pricing. The intro price is $39.99 for this. And I've got a link in the description that'll take you to the page if you want to check it out, learn more about it, or pick it up. But I was really surprised at the $39 price tag because I thought it would have been at least $50 for this. But, I highly recommend this. I think that over time, this is going to be one of those classic Waves compressors that you just have to have, like the CLA-2A and the CLA-76. But that's my review of the RS124. Any questions, comments, let me know, and I'll catch y'all next time. I want to invite everyone to check out my new podcast, the Faders Up Podcast. It's a podcast about pro audio. I've got me and 3 other Nashville professionals. We're discussing pro audio topics, pro audio lifestyle. And it's available on Apple Podcasts and it's available on Spotify. So check it out, rate it, let me know what you think.